Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our July meeting. And the agenda for this meeting is that we'll start with Mark's presentation on flows. It's a sequel from last time. If you all have missed last session, you can certainly look it up in our YouTube channel, which is San Ramon SFDC YouTube channel. And the title for today's meeting is Turn Up the Heat and Take Your Flows to the Next Level with Actions and Lightning Components. So this meeting is a sequel of last time, so it will be great if you can also catch up with last time's meeting and subscribe to our channel. Also, after Mark's meeting, after Mark's presentation, we will have Ohana Wheel of Fortune, which we'll spin, and one lucky winner will get a certification voucher. And the only requirement is that you stay till the end of this meeting and provide me your email and valid WebAssessor email proof. And then, yeah, and the certification vouchers will be yours. Let's move on from this to, yeah, this is me, Shiba Tukral. I've been the group leader of San Ramon admin group since 2020. And this is a short profile on me. And we have a social media presence in LinkedIn, Twitter, and we have in YouTube over 100 subscribers. So please do follow us there and join us and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, this month, it was a great surprise to know that I was one of the chosen people in one of the 65 global community leaders who got chosen into this Cgl Advisory Board. Basically, this board, thanks, Mark. So basically, this board helps to, they will decide how we can get more engagement in the community and more, regular meetings and useful topics that we can do together. Next, it's great if you could share your updates in the chat and let us know, share your LinkedIn profile, any latest breaks in certifications or job breaks. Love to share with us. And if you see these, notice these cute looking emojis. Those I downloaded from Trailmoji. It's an app and you can actually get benefit from these in the social media by using these and replacing and generally just talking about any new things that you have. Then a small tip, please save the chat, which is the 3 dots at the bottom of the chat screen has, if you click on that, you can save the entire chat for the session. So you can do that. And I listed some flow resources just to help you with this session. And I will just post all these links in the chat after my introduction is over. And then this month's findings, this was a very interesting share by Mark, and I thought I'll include it. These links are very useful as well, so I'll post it in the chat. And then I found these couple of links very interesting as well. This is Salesforce Admin's Toolkit and Quick Actions with Lightning Web Components by Kapil Batra. So I will post those links as well. Should be helpful to everyone. And with this, let's start with Mark's presentation. Mark, I give it over to you. And I'm stopping the share now. So I'm very happy to see some of our rad women people, Narjas, Cindy, amongst a few of them. Please do hi. So please make it interactive and please feel free to ask Mark any questions while he's doing his presentation. He would like you to interrupt him and ask questions while he's going. Thank you. Over to you, Mark.
Okay, is my screen sharing for everyone?
Yeah.
All right, so my apologies if I have to mute and duck off cam. My allergies have been acting up this morning, so I can go from fine to like sneezing fit for about 20 seconds back to being fine. So I'm usually pretty good about catching it and muting, but that happens, just my apologies in advance. So we are talking about turning up the heat with advanced flow topics. And I think right now, none of us really want the heat up any higher in the outside world, but you know, inside our orgs is a different matter. So who am I if we haven't had a chance to meet before? I think I've had a chance to meet quite a few of you in previous sessions, and then also some of you from Rad Women Code who are amongst my learners and other stuff like that. So I am a Salesforce technical architect at United Health Group. I am a co-leader of the Charlottesville, Virginia Community Group. I have 14 certifications and really keep trying to get time to do that last one for the systems architect, to get that one as well. I'm a Salesforce MVP and a Rad Women Code coach. I am available on Twitter here. I'm also on the Trailblazer community, and I'll share that link because it has links to my Twitter and LinkedIn to get there, and then my website, which I don't use a whole lot. It's not showing me chat here. All right. So wanted to start off with a couple of basics here before we jump into the new stuff of what is Salesforce Flows. So for those of you that have not necessarily worked with this before, Salesforce Flows, these are interactive screen components or backend automations that are built using a visual programming interface called Flow Builder. So the Salesforce Flow Builder looks like this. This is a pretty complex flow that's incorporating a bunch of stuff into it. You can see some different elements here for actions and stuff like that. And they break into a couple different categories. So we have user interactive flows, which are screen flows, and then we have backend flows. These are other types of logic. They're usually called by something else. They're triggered by a schedule. They are triggered by a record change. They are triggered by a platform event, et cetera. These are all have something else that starts them going in some cases, rather than a user interacting with them. And the flow types. Your screen flow, again, these are interactive. They can leverage other flows. They can be including backend flows. They can have Lightning components, custom interfaces, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, is this Lightning component piece of it. There are also scheduled flows. Again, these are backend automations. What starts these off as time. Auto-launched flows, these are essentially called by something else. So they're either called as a subflow, a process builder calls them, some Apex code makes them happen. They're called from another parent flow. And we'll be doing a little bit with subflows today. There are record triggered flows. These are the flows that work just like a trigger in a lot of ways. And you can do before insert, before update, after update, and other things like that, because they're based on database actions happening in the system. And your platform event. These are usually your integration pattern type stuff where you're processing a platform event that's essentially a special object that's passing a message or doing stuff like that between things, but it runs things across instead of a direct, like I'm passing to this and this knows what it's going. It's kind of like I'm going to throw this ball into the pipeline and it's going to get out at the right place. So instead of, you know, your usual way that you chain stuff together is, I think of it like a messenger. I take the messenger, I pass it to the directly to the person I'm going to. I know who it's going to, and I'm putting it there. And your platform event is a little bit more like sending a message through the mail. You're like, look, I'm sending it to this, and I want it to go to anyone who matches this from there, and it's that kind of thing. And there's consumers that listen to it. Flows can be one of the things that listen to those. They're really powerful when you get into more advanced integrations. And if you study for that integration and architecture design exam, you'll find some stuff about platform events in there. There's really cool things there, but we're not getting into that much today because that really is kind of an automation pattern. The basic flow elements. So let's start off with our basics. Everything's useless without the data. So here's our data elements. We can create records, update records, get records, and delete records. These are the things that interact with Salesforce. Typically, if you don't have one of these little pink squares in your flow, your data is not actually in Salesforce. So, you know, if you put it in, and you change it and update in the flow and everything else, until it has one of these update records or create records, that stuff just doesn't exist in Salesforce. It is purely in the memory, in the operation of your flow, and doesn't exist anywhere else. And if your flow ends and hasn't been saved, your changes are just gone. And for those of you who've done any stuff with Apex, these are equivalent of SQL queries. Your get records are SQL queries, basically, and DML statements. So your create records is an insert statement. Your update records is an update statement, and delete records is a delete. So these directly correspond to what Apex does to get stuff from the database and put stuff back in. They directly correlate. So learning how to use flows is one step towards learning how to use Apex. Your basic elements here for logic. So these are your plumbing for how data passes through your flows and what happens for your logic. So, you know, this assignment is, I'm taking this data here and I'm putting it in this. I can take it from a formula or take it from something I get from a record. I can set a variable. I can update what I want a record to have in it along the way with assignments. I can do decisions. So I can say, all right, if the record is this or this, I want it to go this way. If it's the record that says this or this, I want it to go this way. You can loop across stuff and go, okay, for this whole bunch of records, I want to loop across them and do this set of actions to them. And that is, you know, really powerful. This newer one, the collection sort, really, really useful to be able to say, okay, I've got them and I want to put them into a certain priority. So this is a new one, but these are still basic elements. Your last basic element is also an advanced element, and it's a screen element. And screen component element is super basic. You have a bunch of stuff that you can do with it from out of the box. You can drag stuff onto the canvas and interact with it. But we have custom Lightning components that we can do, or Lightning components we can get as part of managed packages we can use in Flows. And we can take our flows from that sort of screen by screen, click here, do this, click here, do this. We can do some really powerful things. And we're going to play around with that today that are like super advanced on Flows that can produce some really cool things. So I'm going to show you one where you can actually work with entire sets of records and data components here. And you can also have actions, which are one of the other things. These are Apex code that's been set up to do stuff. And you may have come across these originally. They were sort of invocable methods that Process Builder could use if you had. And you may have come across something where it says, use this Apex action here and put this in. And the invocable methods that Process Builder could use were sort of basic. They were kind of limited. These actions that you can use in Flow are much more advanced and can actually have a special component interface to go along with them. We'll play around with some actions that you can use. And the last one that's in advanced is a subflow. And while the flow itself, the subflow itself isn't really that advanced necessarily, there's a little bit of trickiness into using the subflows and passing data back and forth. And we'll want to play around a little bit with how to leverage a subflow to do things and sort of make it a little bit more modular. So these are kind of the advanced elements. This is most of what we're going to be talking about today and kind of demoing. So does anyone have any kind of questions, some basics on Flow before we get in? Keep in mind, you know, this is your session here as much as it is mine. And, you know, I want you to chime in, interrupt, ask questions, throw things in the chat as relevant, you know, just, you know, try to get the most out of the session that we can here.
Mayank, you had some question, right?
And keep in mind the chat is not showing for me for some reason today, so my apologies.
Yeah, no worries. Mark, or maybe it's a question for everyone. So what I'm trying to what I'm trying to know is basically build a flow, when on the prod user gets deactivated. So all, the managed package licenses should be taken away.
Uh-huh.
So the challenge for me is how should I, because I want to do this on the lower environment, right? So I want to do this on a lower environment where I can build it, test it, and
Right.
observe, and then do the on the production. But
Mhm.
and it's any managed package when you install, then you don't get this managed package licenses and all those stuff. That's only available on the production. So just trying to get your idea. Is there a way that I can do this on, let's say, any trailhead?
So are we talking about permission set licenses, or are we talking about the individual like user license stuff where you add them in as a user or not to
This is the managed package license I'm talking about. So let's say I'm using two managed packages instead, like say Twilio or let's say anything else, which you
Right.
have to assign it. So that license still stick to to that app when you
Right.
deactivate it.
Okay, that is a really kind of special challenge, and it's not easy to do and test in a sandbox environment if you're not actually also getting the ability to assign that license to a user. And there's a reason why Salesforce is trying to kind of migrate away from that kind of license stuff, is part of that, because it's hard to do this kind of thing. So building in a lower environment is probably going to be a challenge on the sandbox. I mean, potentially you could do it in a environment where you got like a dev org, like a standalone dev org, where you could install the managed package, try it out, test the logic, and work with it there. And then, because that would have potentially licenses in there from like a trial, and then figure that out and migrate it. But it's not an easy. There's not an easy way to do that anywhere, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think the one that you just mentioned, to get a trial on set it up on the dev org, might help me in terms of test it
You
out.
can at least usually play around with it to figure out how to do it and work with it and what you need to do and like what you need to look for, because like the string that you need to search for may be different and that sort of thing to look at. Like, what is the, you may see this name for the license, but what you may have to look for is something different, or which fields. So
okay, yeah, sounds good. Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
all right, anyone have anything else on kind of our basics before we get into the more advanced stuff here?
I think we're good so far.
Okay. Let's see, I've got this zoomed in way high for, there we go. That's a little bit better. All right. So let's talk about the subflows here that we can do. All right. Subflows are flows that we can call from something else, and we can't always call them from every type of flow. For example, right now, your pre-save flows, or your essentially a record triggered flows that's called a before save, before update, before insert, before update, those you cannot currently do a subflow with, but we can do subflows and other stuff. So I had, let's see, which one would I want to do with here? We had an example one of, there we go. All right, so I've got this scheduled flow for a delinquent account owner, someone that's had something that hasn't happened yet, and I want to make it reusable. So I've got this as an action that I put in here, this send email action. But say I have something where I want to make it really easy for me to do the same thing over and over again for this one. So I want to flag this and do some updates to the account record, and I always want to put it in, and I want to make it so I don't have to redo this because I'm doing this a lot. So I could come in here and I could take and I could rebuild this over and over again, and I could have a flow, and I could have another flow, and I could have this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece. But what I want to do instead is I want to make it reusable. So I just bring the same subflow in and I call it everywhere that I need it. So what I'm going to do here now is really quickly build a new subflow. And my subflow, the nice thing is that this then means I only have to change it once. So I don't have to change it over and over again. Because this is something that I'm calling from elsewhere, I'm going to give it this auto-launched flow, no trigger. This is one that's being done whenever something else calls it. It's not happening all the time. It's not running when I change a record. It's just happening whenever I have something attached to it. And I'm having a little bit of bandwidth issues, so I'm going to stop my camera for a bit here while we operate here. This one is running when something else calls it. In this case, because I think it's a little bit easier to follow sometimes than the regular flow, I'm going to do this auto layout again. This is the beta interface. This one kind of lets you run things in a certain operation and go. So what can I do with my subflow? Well, one of the things I can do is if I'm past a record, I can take and do things with that record. So say one of the things I want to do is I've got a record that comes in from a delinquent and account, one that hasn't been updated, and I want to do some things on there to follow up. So what I might do is I'm going to give myself a variable record ID, and this is I'm going to get this in from my existing flow. So I'm marking this as available for input because I need something outside this flow to give me a value for it. And I could potentially allow it for a collection. I'm going to keep it real easy here right now and just do a single record here. So say I have on my delinquent account, these are accounts that haven't had an update and they haven't been contacted. Now, what if I have some, opportunities on them that are high priority, and because my account hasn't been updated in a while, my opportunities are also potentially languishing and haven't been updating, and I want to make a follow-up on those opportunities for this particular account that's that delinquent. So I can choose to do a get records, because what I have to begin with is I have the ID of my account record, but I don't have the ID of my associated records here. So I am going to put in a get opportunity records for delinquent account. And I've got my opportunity here. Now I'm going to look for the account ID, and it's equal to my variable record ID. And you know what? That's not a great variable name, right? Because record ID, what record ID? Is this my record ID? Which one? Naming is everything. All right, sorry about that. Wasn't quite fast enough on that first sneeze, but okay. So I'm going to call this account record ID. I want this to be usable. I want to be able to tell what this is. So I'm naming it account record ID. The other thing I've seen where it comes in really handy for some cases is because you get these long lists and complex flows. I might want to prefix it with saying VAR, because now I know exactly what this is. So I've got a flow. I'm now using it. Notice I came in here, it updated my element. It did that smartly. I want all records. So I'm now saying this is a collection, and I want to automatically store the fields that I'm going to be working on here. If I save this flow, I'm going to do this. Now I've got some advanced options. I can say all sorts of things. I can choose how it runs. So I can say, oh, you know what? I want this to run in user or system context, depending on how it's launched. I could also say maybe I want it to run in system context sharing because I'm going to update some fields that they can update. I can also say system context without sharing because then I need them to work on all opportunities, even if it's not one they own or have access to with this record. These how to run the flow are really powerful. Kind of watch it with the system context with sharing or without sharing. When I first heard this with sharing versus without sharing was kind of, to me, was sort of backwards. And it may be that way for you because I read with sharing and I'm like, okay, that's good. That's the record is shared to me. No, that's not what it means. Without sharing, that means it's having access to everything. And I'm like, wait, but if it's sharing, then that means the record is shared with that system, whereas without the reason why is because it's not with or without sharing, it's with or without the sharing table in Salesforce, which contains all the rules for where records are shared. So when I say without sharing, I'm saying I'm giving the system access and I'm using the equivalent of view all and modify all on all these records. When I'm running it this way, I'm running it as a user and it can only see the same records that user can see. So while it can work on fields that it would normally have access to on those records, it can't see any records that that user would normally be able to see. And that's what this with sharing is. It's that kind of combined. So say, I have account reps across, 10 territories and I limit them. And so people could only see the opportunities for their territory. This is where that with sharing comes in. In this case, we don't really care. So I'm going to run it in the user context. We can also pick the API version. Notice this changes with each release, and there's a few of them now. That wasn't possible before release 50. So versions were 49, 50, 51, 52. We will be soon coming up here on the preview period of winter 22. And when that happens, we will see an API version of 53 become available here. And our interview label. I can set this if we pause interviews. It's really useful to set a label that's meaningful, but if it's not a pause interview, the one that people come back to won't matter much. So I have now saved my record. It's here. I have not activated this, but now when I activate this, if I come to my other flow, I can come here and I can select a subflow and I have, I'm going to have to reload the page, but come in here, subflow, and I can now select my flow. And notice I've got some input variables here that I can set and might need to set. So it helps if I could type today. All right. Set input variables. I wonder why this isn't letting me set it. There we go. Include. And I am going to pick from here, one of mine that I have already, which is from, let's see, I think this is a flow here, variable. Nope, wrong one. Chose poorly here. Record account, that's it. All right, so I'm going to do this for my account ID. So now I'm passing the account ID into my subflow. So when this gets called, it will pass it over there. And I could use the same subflow in the same way, but I could potentially have it do different things for this one versus this one, or versus another. So I could potentially pass it a value that says later on and makes it do a decision. And what does it put in there? Does it create tasks for this or not? Lots of different things. So I'm going to go back to my subflow now. That is not my subflow that I wanted. All right, Zoom tools, get out of the way. And I've got my opportunity records. Now what do I want to do with them? All right. So I am going to say, I've got these opportunity records. I want to loop across them. And sorry about that, another sneezing fit here. I see a question there from Marina. How does the first option work? Which option were you talking about there?
Irina?
Okay. Yep. So user or system context. So the first option, it bases on how they work. So if it runs in system context, it runs as the system user with sharing or without sharing, depending on what calls it. So if it runs as a user, it runs as the user. But if I run as a process builder, for example, the process flow, when it calls it, runs as a system user without sharing. And so that subflow will run as a system user without sharing. If I have it in a screen flow that's running as a system user with sharing, and I call a subflow, it will then run as a system user without sharing. So it all depends on how it's called for that first option on the record. So when you do a user, it's always running as user, but that depends on it running in a context that's the user. So for example, a process flow never runs as a user. When it runs as a screen on a layout, it can run as a user or a system depending on what that particular parent flow is set as. So the idea being here on that first option is you're saying, I'm going to inherit however this is running, as opposed to specifying system or not system. The reason why is you can't really go from a system context to a user context currently in Salesforce. So you can open back up again to open it up to system level, but you can't like close it back down again. So if you start off with if your flow is started in system context, you can't close it back down to user. So it just has an inheritance. There is not an explicit run this as the user if it's called from a system context. Does that make sense? Yep, it's inherited sharing in Apex. Yep, 100%. So it's exactly, that's literally what it is. It's in that inherited from Apex. There is no there is no difference between it. There is a user context coming to Apex. And once that user context comes to Apex, where there is the ability to say, okay, it ran as system, but even if it's called a system now, I want it to run as the user, that is coming. And we'll probably see that coming in Flows in a later case. But right now, there's no user mode Apex. It is coming, though. That's under development. And a question from Vinod here about creating a scheduled flow action. And if you create a new version with a different condition, what happens to the existing scheduled actions? So the existing scheduled actions, I believe, actually, I think what happens is when it runs with a scheduled action, it changes and reruns in the flow and sees if it still matches. So it actually will go back and update. And so if it no longer meets the criteria, those actions shouldn't run, because what's not there is, what it's there is not the actual action that's scheduled. What is scheduled in the system is essentially run this flow again to see if it matches the criteria. So it doesn't have in there, send this email at this date. It has run this flow and this scheduled path of the flow and see if it still matches. So it's based on if your criteria changes and it would no longer go across a certain path, then it will not do that path anymore. So those actions wouldn't happen anymore. Okay. All right, so let's jump into our loop here. So I'm going to give this a really basic name, loop across opportunities. I'm going to give it a collection variable, and right now the only one I have is these from opportunities. And I've got my choice. We do first item to last or last item to first. Now, one of the elements we had here before that we didn't have is our collection sort. So one of the things you'll notice about this, I've got a sort order ascending, but like if I want to change it again after I get those records, I didn't have that before. So now I have this here where I can do this, and I don't need to put in a sort here separately, but I may want to sort these later because I may be doing something else with them. So I'm looping across my opportunities. And for each one that's in this, I want to add them to a text resource. So I'm going to show this here. I'm going to create a text resource, or I'm going to create a variable here. And the type is text. And this is going to be my opportunity names. Again, would help if I could type. So I'm not trying to use this inside or outside of the flow, so I'm leaving these blank. I'm not trying to set it a value here because of this. I want to set this inside here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add stuff to this. Oh, my apologies. This is definitely not the time to be having allergy attack here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this, add opportunity names to my list. So I'm going to take and I'm going to choose my thing here for opportunity names. And now my operator, I can do add. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in essentially the new values here. And because it's text, I can put in this. So I'm going to add a comma. We'll format it in just a minute, but I get my current item from the loop, which is an opportunity. And I'm going to do here. I want name. So I've got opportunity name. And so this is now just going to add it to my list each time. And I can potentially then do, because I've got this one, so each time it adds one, it would then add a comma and a space afterwards. And so I'm going to do this. Put this in because it's text. I think it should let me do this. And so now that I have this, I'm going to call an action here. And again, this gets into the more advanced stuff. This is our Apex code we're calling from something else. I'm going to make a task for this person here. And I'm going to call this the at-risk account opportunities. Because if you're not talking to the account, they're not updating things on that account, guess what? Those opportunities are at risk. So we want to have something that flags them to say, hey, guess what? This is not good. You are potentially jeopardizing this account. So I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to relate it to the account record. I'm going to give it a subject line, and I'm going to relate it to a owner, which is going to be the account owner. So I have here, oh wait, I did not do that. Okay. So let me uncheck this here. I'm going to give it a due date. And because of the way that this flow stuff works, I can't use relative date here. I have to give it a fixed date. I don't want to give it a fixed date. I want to give it a relative date. So I want to say when this runs, they have to do this within X amount of time. So I've got a date value here that I'm going to give it for a variable. And this is task due date. And it's a date type. And it's got a default value that's not here. Oh, wait. I didn't want a variable. I wanted a formula. There we go. And it is still a date value. But I'm going to do today plus 7. Keep in mind this formula editor isn't great. I often go back to the Salesforce formula editor, test it out there to make sure it is, but this is a pretty simpler formula. So I'm going to say they've got a week to do this task. All right. And now I'm going to go ahead and close that out because I need some information from my account record here. Thing is, I didn't get my account record. So I'm going to go back to my account record here. And I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to get my account record as well. Why am I doing this up at the top instead of down at the bottom? Because in a lot of cases, you really want to try to optimize. So anything that you need to do, putting your get stuff together at the top, putting your working stuff together in the middle, and putting your create stuff and your DML stuff at the end. It's an easy logical flow. So if you're looking at this, you're fairly consistent. If you're kind of going back and forth to the database a lot, you have a more complex flow, it may make sense to put it elsewhere. But for simpler flows, it often makes the most sense to get everything you need at the beginning, save everything you need to save at the end, and then just work on it in the middle. Does that make sense? So I'm going to do a get element here. And I'm going to call this get delinquent account. And it is an account record. And it's going to be the account based on my account ID is my variable. Again, this is why I like this, because on this long screen, I can type VAR and know that I'm jumping to this. So I know I can get this. It's a single record because it's an ID, so it's only one, and then I'm good with that. Same here with my formula field. I could have done this when I edited it, and instead of task due date, formula. And so now if I type FORM or FRM or whatever convention that works with, I know when I'm trying to work with this thing later on, I can pretty much immediately jump to that element here by typing. So if I know I'm looking for formulas, I put in formula. If I know I'm looking for this, I put in this. So formula task due date. So that's it. Then I can set up my subject line, at-risk opportunities from delinquent account, and my description here. So in my description, I can take and put in a couple different types of things. I could put in my variable for opportunity names and just do it that way. But I could also do what's called a text template. And then I could do some other formatting and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new resource because I don't have one of these yet. I'm going to call it a text template because now I can put all sorts of things in there. And so this is an API name, so it's not going to like those spaces. So again, text at risk task description. Because I want to be able to find this stuff. I want to be able to read it in that long list. So I can take and put it. Okay, let's do this. The following opportunities are at risk because the account is delinquent or because the account has not been contacted recently. And now I'm going to bring in and I'm going to do my opportunity names. And so now I've got this filled out here. And now I can give it the name. I'm going to go back to my record, it's the account, and because I need to give it an ID, it's the account owner. The owner field doesn't exist on the account object. Anyone know why I'm getting this, by the way? It's an obscure error. It doesn't make much sense. The reason why is because this is a relationship. So what I need to do is come out one step further and get the user ID for this person. So it's the account record, the owner field, which is a lookup to a user, and then the ID of that user that it looks up to. So I've got to follow that relationship all the way out. Otherwise, it doesn't work and gets cranky at me, and then we okay. So now my subflow is creating a task for these accounts that are delinquent. And my action lets me do something that I could do, and I could do with the basic elements. I could absolutely take and put each one of these things together in a separate thing and do this and do this and do this and do a create record that's a task. But my action saves me some of those steps and lets me put some stuff together in a way that's a little bit more modular. And so I focus on things like the due date that required me to do some work. And I focus on things like the text template and my other stuff, rather than okay, this element set this value, this assignment, this assignment, this assignment. So when I first started with Flow, you had to do that. You had to actually take and say, okay, I'm going to create a record, and it's going to be a task, and it has this field. It's going to be this, it has this field. It's going to be this, it has this field. It's going to be this, and it has this value in their assignment, and then do a create records. We don't have to do that anymore. So now I have to save this as a new version because I had already activated it before. So it'd be available in that other flow. And now that I've saved it and I activate it, this is now update in that other flow. So this is an example of how we could use a subflow. And the thing is, I can have this action come in here and I can call it as a subflow. I can use this anywhere. In this case, I can make it a little bit more versatile. I can make it so it sends from different kinds of templates. I could make it so it doesn't have to be just this one. I could use it for all sorts of things. I could put it in a different one where it has a different version based on this, based on the input variable. But this is how we use subflows. And notice this keeps my flow a little bit pretty readable. So I can tell sort of what's happening. I could actually name this something a little bit better here. So instead of calling it delinquent account opportunity subflow, I'm going to say create task for delinquent account opportunities. My flow stays readable. If I want to do the same thing in other of these actions, so say I want to have it do the same thing here, I don't need to rebuild this flow. I don't need to make this one in there 5 times. I call it the same way that I was doing here and add it in as another element. And I put in here record, ID. Oh. Well, that one would work. But okay, yeah, that was the one I wanted. Record, ID. And I'm going to do the same thing. So again, I can name it consistently, but here we go. So I'm not having to rebuild that logic anywhere. I'm not having to try to deal with some complex branching and send it off to here, there, or does it go to this one and then it goes to this one? So this 2 go to this node, then this 2 goes to this node. I don't have to deal with the decisions and trying to put those decision elements in. I can just reuse my existing flow and call it whenever I need it. And I can give it different values. So if I add in a flow value and I say, you know, maybe one of the things I add here is I'll add a new resource in. I'm going to have it be a variable. And I'm going to give it task urgency. Okay, my data type, it's a pick list. It's available for input. Let's just do text. Here. So if I put this in and I use this, I've got it. I can give it different text values and stuff like that. But now I could leverage this one. I'm going to save it and activate it here. So how did I make my subflow more versatile with this? Well, let's save. Yeah. All right, refresh here. And my task urgency, I can now set this. So I can set it, and I can put text in here, and I can say urgent. And now my subflow, if I were working with this for a task, I could set the priority on my task and say, hey, this priority needs to be really high on this one. Whereas on this one, I didn't have to do it. So now I've made my logic a little bit more versatile. I can make my flow here a little bit more flexible. I could come into this one and put in a element here afterwards that would then update as an assignment, decision, etc. But I can encapsulate that logic so it's a little bit easier. And if I differentiate these two, again in my parent flow, create urgent task. So I read my parent flow, and I've got a really clear idea of exactly what's happening. And I've reused my flow. So I don't have to rebuild this over and over again. I've got flexibility to use this and work with that. So I'm going to take a second to pause and talk for this before we jump into the next topic, which will be into the screen flows where we can do custom component work in there, and see if anyone has any questions here or stuff they want to kind of discuss. And feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself and ask questions. Anything?
Diana has a question. Diana, you want to unmute yourself, please? Diana has a question. Can we have subflow with screens?
So you absolutely can have a subflow with screens. So you can have a subflow that you can kind of encapsulate. So for example, where I work, we do, I work on an org that's the employee health and safety for United Health, and includes the, it includes doing like contact tracing and stuff like that. And we have it broken down into subflows where, for example, it starts off with a main parent flow. That's the interview for people who have COVID that may have been involved in a patient care scenario or whatever, where they may have exposed people. And it calls various subflows that are also screen flows. So yes, you can have a subflow that is a screen flow version of a subflow, because the parent flow that I was working with here, this one is a scheduled flow. I had to do a subflow that was a auto launch because this one can't have screens in it. If my parent flow is a flow that has screens in it, then I can call a subflow that has screens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Mark, thank you.
Okay. And then there was another
I
question
guess,
here that, okay.
go ahead.
Sorry, what did you have? Additional question there?
I guess I like to see some examples, like what would you pass from the parent flow? Like, what if the parent flow had a bunch of screen entries and the subflows, the screen subflows would take that entry from the parent flow?
So it usually varies a little bit depending on that. And I'll tell you, there's two different tactics to use with this. So one of them is you can do the same thing. You can set a variable available for output and variables available for input. And so you can pass them directly in. The other thing is within a screen that's a subflow of another one, you can actually call you can say the flow that you can reference stuff on the flow that in the parent flow, you can reference stuff that's in the child flow. And the child flow, you can't directly reference stuff that's in the parent because it's not built knowing what's in the parent. So what you have to do is you have to essentially pass values into that subflow. So if you need to pass like all the screens into it, you want to do that. If you need to pass a few of those things, typically what often ends up happening though is instead of trying to pass a lot of values into it, what ends up happening is you save the work that you have so far to your records in Salesforce. And then from within the new child subflow, the only thing you're doing is passing in an ID of the records it's supposed to be working on, or the record it's supposed to be working on, and then you give it and then you actually do a get record, and then find the associated fields that you need for it from that individual record. Because then it's not dependent on you passing a lot of information into it. You can, of course, set it where you're saying, okay, I've got this screen, this value, this value, this value, this value, this value, et cetera, that you're passing into your subflow, but it can get really tedious. So if you need to like pass in all the values from those screens, you're probably not gonna, it's not really efficient. Like you can do it, but it's not really efficient. So your typical best bet is to save your work as it is, then call the subflow by passing it certain record ID information, and then having it do get records to get that information fresh by itself, because that also makes it a little bit more modular. It's not dependent on a particular parent setting something, parent flow, setting things up in a certain way and passing it a certain set of values in an exactly specific way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I got it. Thanks.
It's hard to it's hard to demo here. We don't have a ton of time, so it's not something I prepared a demo of right now to try to do something more complex like that, because I'm trying to stick to working with the basics. And the screen flows, this stuff that we're getting ready to do with lightning components and screen flows is really quite interesting for a lot of people. It's really, it's super powerful, and I think it's something that a lot of people will want to see. So I want to make sure we have some time to play around with that. And then there was a question here that was asked that they didn't actually send. So is it possible to call an auto launch flow from a VF page? Not from the Visualforce page directly. What you do is you can actually pass you can call it from Apex code though. So you can call a flow from Apex. And so launching a flow from Apex, there is a way that you can do this. So you can call a Salesforce flow from within Apex. And because Visualforce pages have a controller that goes along with them, what you can do is you can extend the Visualforce page controller, or having a custom controller where you can use the Apex code to launch. So here's an example of Visualforce page where they've done that, where they set up the flow controller here and then they called it. So it is possible to call a flow from a Visualforce page. An auto-launched flow, it doesn't care whether it's auto-launched or not, but you have to make sure you're passing the values to it and other stuff like that. And in this case, it actually has a start button that launches the flow to make it do something. So you can have those. They're just, it's really being called by Apex, so you're leveraging the Apex controller to do the work on your Visualforce page, but it is possible to do that. And I'll share this link here in the chat.
I'm on.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, this is Vinod. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I have a two date fields. I have a two date fields. Okay. So depending upon the scenario, either one have a value. So now what I want to do, like I have a screen element where I have a date field. I want to populate if any one of them have value, I need to populate, I need to pre-populate. Okay. So actually if I use formula to write to check whether this field has value, so I'm not able to pre-populate the values default. Yeah. So but if I use the same variable in create records, I'm able to populate the value.
Okay, so I was having a little bit of trouble hearing you, Vinod. Your audio is a little bit light, like you're kind of not so close to the microphone.
Okay. See, right. I have a screen element and I have a create record. Okay. So what I'm trying to do, I have a two date fields. Okay. So depending on the scenario, either one has a value. So if any one of the field has a value, I need to show it as a default value in the screen component. Okay. But what happens, like it's throwing null value. But if I use the same variable in create record, it's giving the value. Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I'd have to actually look at the flow to see that, because that sounds odd to me.
Okay.
Yeah, that does sound odd. Like I can't think of anything that would work along those lines. All right. So let's talk about components here. So when we have our flows, and with our flow builder, you know, we've looked at screen components before, and we've got stuff here, and we drag things in. And for example, you know, looking at our, where is it here? This is from the one we were building last session. You know, our intro screen, we have our standard stuff here that's along the left-hand side, inputs and display components. These are all Lightning components that are provided, but we can extend this with other Lightning components. And this is the kind of superpower section of where you really can make flows do things that are super impressive. And I'll share this here in the chat. This is a site called Unofficial SF, and it has all kinds of things you can do with Lightning components in your pages and be able to add them and work with them and do other stuff like that. So we'll take a look at one of the Lightning components here that I really like and use a lot in flow work that I do, which is the data table component. So this data table component here was written by Eric Smith. He's an MVP who comes in and contributes this. And basically, this lets you take and display a set of records as if it is a related list and work with it in the same way that you would a data table and a related list. And so we've got a new version here that is version 3.3.0. This was his most recent as of, you know, about 12 days ago, so not even 2 weeks ago. This is a Lightning Web component that's come in, and you can work with it. So what I want to show here is an org that I have where I've kind of built out something. This is a sort of proof of concept I was working on at one point in time as an app called Breaker. And Breaker was not about breaking things. It was about breaking up people's day. So one of the things that happened a lot of cases was, you know, I found that people, you know, this is something I was playing around with last year. Basically, everyone went on lockdown. Suddenly people were working from home. And there were a lot of the things that people would have that they were doing that weren't, you know, that they used to do at the office. And so they might have group walks and meditation and, you know, other types of activities that would happen. And those all stopped when, you know, everyone stopped being in the office. And so I have this in here. I guess I never made one specifically for this, so I think service will work for this. So I made a little app that would, all right, here it is. So I made a little app that would give people some flexibility to help schedule stuff. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any break activities scheduled in here today. So I'm going to create a couple break activities so you can see this in action here. And I'm going to call it club meeting. And this is Ramon admin group. And I'm going to do the advanced flows, details, meeting details below, and here's our Zoom details. Right, and our activity started. I'm going to push this back a little bit because of time here, so I'm going to set this for instead, let's say 3 p.m. So it shows here on my filtered schedule, and here I'll say 5 p.m. So it's showing on my schedule. So here's one of our break activities, right? And now I'm going to make another one here real quick. And I'm going to call it meditation and meditation break. So the idea was that people could put stuff in for specific times, dates, meetups, etc. And people would be able to come in every day, and when they logged in their Salesforce, be able to sign up for available activities for that. Right. And let me refresh this. Register here for today's available breaks. So notice my flow comes in, it's sitting here on their home screen. I could have made it flasher and stuff like that, but I can ask like what type of item someone's interested in. I'm going to say club meeting. And notice it's giving me these in a data table format. So I can select the ones that I want, come in, throws a little bit of confetti around, causes my screen to reload. And now I've got my San Ramon admin group into my today's events because it created an event record. And let's say I also want to look at meditation stuff. Oh, good. We've got a meditation break tonight. It's going to add this in. And doesn't always make that reload, but it's there. All right. So this is a really basic, kind of simple flow. It's not doing anything advanced from an end user perspective. But for those of you who've had to do development to think about this, what would you have had to do to develop something like this with code? You'd have probably needed to do this. You'd have had to add this in. You'd have needed the data table component. You'd have had to make a visual for space. There's a lot of stuff that would go on to make this happen. So let's look at how this works from behind the scenes in a flow. So my first one that I'm setting here, it's just some display text, right? Just giving it this. Well, you know, I may want to make this a little bit more visible. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to select it all. And I'm going to make the text a little bigger. I just want this to stand out a little bit more when people are talking. And, you know, register here, because it's important from a work perspective that people take breaks on a regular basis. How do I do my category of interest? Well, I use the standard component. I use the radio buttons component. One of the nice things that changed was the previous time where you could use before where you had to redo this, now you can swap back and forth between this. So if I wanted this to be text for radio buttons, I could, or checkboxes instead. So display a little bit differently. Let me select multiple. I wanted to keep it simple, so I kept it with radio buttons. But this is all your out-of-the-box stuff. There's nothing too fancy here. We're not doing anything crazy with this yet. But now I'm doing my get element. So the only thing I did, I took and said, okay, let's do a query, and I want to get my break activity categories. And I want to get the ones that are time until start is between 0 and 24 hours away. So I wanted to send up the activities for the next day. How many of you sign up for stuff on your calendar, you put it there, and if it's more than a week out, you're busy that day, that never happens. So the idea is not to let people get too far out ahead for this. And again, no relative date values here if I pick a date. So you'll see here, I used a formula to calculate the time until start and number of hours, and it's got to be between 0 and 24. So that's what shows here. And it takes and gets all those break activities. And once that's done, here's where we get into the magic. This component here, this data table component, this thing is freaking fantastic. So you'll see here that I've got a number of ones that have been installed, and I can do some different things. This is this data table component. You'll notice that for a lot of things, it looks very different here on this left or this right-hand side for configuration. Right? You're probably used to seeing something that looks more like this, right? It's really plain, it's generic. So one of the things that can be done with these is they can actually have a custom property editor. And Eric was sort of one of the pioneer developers working with this heavily to incorporate it. So instead of this standard interface, he has built this kind of custom interface that's super, super flexible to work with. And so here, you know, I've got this interface, and so I can say, okay, which object is it? And I can do which records to display. So I passed it my collection from the get matching records. And which records are already selected? Well, I don't have any pre-selected here, but I could have a pre-selection that was based on another item. So I've got columns here, and it's like, well, what columns am I showing? I can do lots of different things, but in this case, he made a subflow here that uses other Lightning components that allows you to pick the fields, the columns that you're showing. So he has this one that uses another way of doing it, or you can also type them manually. This is like the old way. You type them manually and you punch in and go this and this and this and this and this. All right, next. Okay, and now we got a preview of what this looks like. Right, and I can come in here and configure this and say, I want it to look like this, I want it to look like that, I want this piece to be here. I can specify my column data and how it works and everything else based on the columns that I've selected and see. I can choose whether or not they're editable. I can choose whether or not they're filterable. Column Wizard has finished, close this window. I can also do it this way, which is the other way to work with it. Notice this is actually a flow that I ran called from a Lightning component. This is another flow from a Lightning component that's done the same way. And I can select from the list of columns here and put them in. So this is really, really cool to be able to cut down on the amount of stuff that you had to kind of have to with custom code and be able to show multiple records at one go, be able to handle selection and stuff like that, because it really makes it easy to do these things. You can choose to display the table header, and that's your label, break activities, header icon, What's the icon for that? I can choose whether or not that shows. I can pick my icons from here. I can choose my maximum number of records to display. So if I say I only want to see the top 5 here, I can do that. I can show borders. I can show row numbers. I can do table behaviors like, do I want it to be required or not? If I say required, I can actually say, okay, they have to make a selection here. I can also say disallow row selection. So I can say they can't select any. This may be, you know, a way to just display things, and I only want it to display, and I don't want them to be able to edit or select or do other things. I just want to show all the child opportunities here. I can show navigation links on name fields. So if I uncheck this, I don't show the record as a link. If I check this, when I show the name field, I automatically show it as a link to the record. I've got some advanced stuff, and I can even go into Apex defined records. That means I can use Apex code, and what it looks like can be anything that I can have in my Apex side there. This is super, super flexible. I can set visibility or not. I can do from my advanced. I can manually assign variables to it. This, I can drag in and I can interact with it just like I do any other Lightning component. I can pick an icon. This is that action that's there. Notice it doesn't do anything. Why? Because this is the component that was built to sit in the flow for the data table for configuration. Quick choice component. This is one that's actually pretty cool. So I can take my choices and I can display as a pick list, a radio button group, or visual cards. So let's say I want to get fancy with this. This is another component. So let's show this where this is. Quick choice. All right. Okay. So this flow-based components now has quick choice built into it. It did not before, but let's take a look at this. So if you're doing flows for people on mobile, sometimes you want to make them look a little bit better, right? Have you ever tried to do a pick list on your phone with your thumb? It's kind of clunky. Well, with this particular component here, we can do cards instead. So instead of doing what I did before, where it was just a plain pick list, I can do visual cards with icons, without icons. I can do them side by side. I can do them in a couple different ways. So this is a pretty cool component to be able to work with. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my selecting categories. And instead of my plain old pick list, I'm going to do this here. All right. So call it visual cards instead. I'm going to do 2 columns. Show icons. Now it's probably not going to make much here, but my icon choice, I can give it the different icons. I can set it stuff. Let's see. I can do this instant navigation mode. So this is a cool one. So instead of having to have someone hit next, I can now make it so when they click that button, they automatically move to the next screen, which is good. If I'm giving them only a single category to pick, then they can just jump straight to that. Apologies there. Someday I'll quit sneezing. All right, so I'm going to give it a pick list field. That's my choice here. Oh, why are you not letting me select pick list field? Do not have any pick list fields here. Okay. All right. Okay, so when you pick visual cards, it makes you do the two-string collection, so labels and values. One-string collection values. So what I would have to do is I'd have to take and sort this and make it get a record set to feed into this. So that's why I hadn't done this. But what I can then do is if I put this in here, all right. Titles, card descriptions. So I need to have it's probably not gonna let me close here. Oh, it is. All right. So right now, what I have is a plain pick list. Oh, I needed that screen still. Choice set. And it's coming from my break activity categories. So I look over here in break activity categories, that's a pick list choice set. But behind the scenes, these are actually an object here. So there is a break activity, has an object, and it's the object is break activity. It's a pick list. What I would have to do to leverage this cards is I would have to take and make break activity an object list, or I have to make a collection of two strings that then fits this. So to leverage this quick choice, two string collections, labels, and values. One string collection for values. Well, to use the card, I need labels and values. So my label would be this, my values could be a description. So I could pull this from an object, I could pull this from a couple different things, but let's set this up real quick. So instead of my categories here, I'm going to do a new I'm going to do a get records here. No, I don't want to do get records right now. Okay, this might get a little bit more complex than what I was looking at here. Let's do this. Do I have it in here in my schema? Object. I think I actually did build an object for this. Right, so I want to extend my stuff here. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to really quickly make a new object. I'm going to call it break types. Or break type. And it's going to be break types. And it's going to be auto number. Excuse me, sorry about that. I did not mean to blast your ears out.
Bless you.
Couldn't quite catch the mute in time for that one. All right, so now set up a new object here. And I'm going to create a couple fields. And this is going to be a text field. And break type. We'll say 40 because I want this to be readable. Line. I'm going to go with my defaults because I'm going to do this trailhead style where I skip the description and everything else. I'm going to make another field that is text. And this one's going to be maybe a little bit longer. I set those short because I wanted to make sure these appear correctly on a card. I don't want people putting something that's, you know, a name that's 1,000 characters and then they can't show up on a card properly. And you know what? I did not set up a tab for this. Bad mark. So I need a tab for break types or else I'm not going to see this object in here. And the tab style, because I've got to pick an icon that is completely irrelevant now, but I still have to go through and pick it. And trailhead style, yeah, just select all, that's fine. And now I can set up a break type. So I'm going to all right. So I'm going to do some Latin stuff here because it's just easy to use this Latin placeholder text for a bunch of these real quick. So break type. Right, so I'm going to put a few of these things in here. So we've got some break types here that correspond to our others. And now that I have these, I've got to do a get element because I need to get my break type. And I can do unfortunately, I can't do that because I haven't put it in here. All right. Let's save as a new version real quick. And I'm going to reload the page because I put these in after the fact. All right. That's not the element I wanted. Here we go. Get records. And now I'm going to do this. So this will be my get break types. And now I can choose this. Nope, not that one. Pick that one. All right. And now I want all the records because it's a collection. And date does not equal blank. Nope. All right. Is null. Is false. I have to put criteria in even if there isn't a good criteria for my get records. So in this case, I put in where it exists. The only criteria I'm giving it. Every record that's in there should have a created date. If a record doesn't have a created date, something very horribly went wrong with the Oracle database that underlies all of Salesforce. All right, so now I have this, got my break types. They're in. And my problem is, does this let me use a record choice set or only pick list field, 2 string collections, 1 string collection values? So let's take a look at this item here and see. So we've got a little bit of a reference information here. So dual string collections, what I feed it. Wait, so input mode equals visual text box. All right, so it doesn't have stuff there. Creating choices from string collection. So essentially here, what they're suggesting is we run an Apex action to do this. And I'm afraid we're going to be starting to run short on time because I want to make sure we have time for a drawing here.
Yeah, Mark, it's a 5 minutes time check.
Yep.
And also I had a question regarding deployment. Other than Visualforce, other 2 ways are custom link and custom button, I think.
Yep.
Are there any pros and cons, or what are the advantages of one over the other?
So there are several different ways. So you can do a Visualforce page where you can put that in. You can also use a Lightning component to display a flow. So you can have a Lightning component that calls the flow. So the Visualforce page is primarily basic. I don't use that to display a flow if it's a screen flow very often. The one place where I have used that before is on if you're doing an unauthenticated site, like Salesforce site, not the community, but a site. But you can also call a flow within a component. So an Aura component. You currently can't do this within an LWC. There's no LWC flow container, but you can have an Aura component that you embed a flow in. And this is the new Salesforce developer. So it is possible you can have a Aura component that has pieces here and use Lightning :flow to display the code in. This is if you're trying to show a flow inside of a custom Lightning component. Maybe you want to make it so that there's stuff around it, but kind of the interactive stuff can be built by an admin, whereas the other stuff around it is built by a programmer because of certain more complexities. I've seen that happen. I have actually used this before in places where we kind of create a, like a little bit of a graphical guided system where we show a flow in one screen and buttons to kind of control and jump around between different flows in another Lightning component. So there's that. There's also here, when it comes to showing flows with buttons, I don't really recommend doing the flow with a button anymore, just as a standard button. Instead, I recommend usually you doing it with an action. So when you do from an action instead of from a button, you can, it's a little bit more kind of easy to work with. So if I go to do it from a button, the way I would do it is old school style, an action. Keep in mind, actions usually shows buttons in Lightning experience, but not always. There are times when they show on the publisher feed if you're like on case. So that's why I draw a distinction here between a button and an action. I can have it run a flow. I can also call a Lightning component or a Lightning Web component, and the Lightning Web component can contain the flow. The Lightning Web component can contain an Aura component, which can contain the flow. A Aura component or Lightning component can contain the flow, or I can call a Visualforce page that had it. The distinction is, if I just want to run the flow, I run the flow. If I have that same flow or that same type of, I'm building some logic and some management around it, and I need to pass it more stuff than just the record ID, then I probably want to use either the Visualforce page or the Aura component to call the flow, because then I have more flexibility in what I can pass it. On the other hand, if I'm coming here from just a button and calling a flow as an action, all I have is which flow I'm running. I don't get to do anything else. I just get to specify which flow I'm running. I don't get to feed it any special values. If I need to feed it values, I can use a Visualforce page to do that, or I can call it directly. The difference between a button and an action here, if I want to deploy it with an action, I can, but I don't have something that says, hey, give me a flow. I just have my URL, on-click JavaScript, Visualforce page, etc. That's all I've got here. So if I'm using a list button, I probably need to do a Visualforce page to embed it. So I can give it stuff to say what the flow is acting on. The plain button doesn't have the ability to call that, and the actions don't have the ability. The other thing is, if I'm trying to do this here with a URL, I can do this in a existing window without sidebar. On the list buttons, I can go to a detailed page button, and it'll let me do it in a new window without sidebar, new window, etc. Your sidebar is your old classic stuff, so you don't see that as much anymore. And the way that you used to do this with a flow with these buttons before they included up under quick actions was you would actually have to take and give it the address of the flow that you were running and put this into the URL. It's not that great anymore because it doesn't have much in the way of context it runs, but the idea is you can pass parameters into the flow other than record IDs. Whereas when you do it from an action, it's on a record page, and it can only take as it gets the single record ID from that record that it's launched from. So if you're just trying to run a flow on a single record, I recommend using an action. If you are trying to run a flow and have it be in a community or a site page, you probably want the Aura component or the Visualforce. If you need to pass additional parameters to it, then I typically recommend using either a button or an action, but calling the Visualforce page, because the Visualforce page, you can give additional parameters to that flow to specify how it runs and how it works. And you can do that also with the URL type, which is a little bit less flexibility, and you don't get any control over how it displays the flow. So there isn't really a best answer. I think action is usually your most straightforward and the one that you probably want to look at first and see if that works. And then if that doesn't work, you have to go to other stuff. The JavaScript options do not exist anymore. JavaScript links are from Classic, and JavaScript buttons don't work in Lightning. So there was a question there from Nargis around the JavaScript option. There isn't one. It doesn't exist anymore. That's a Classic only option, and I wouldn't even really consider it anymore. It's a legacy. Those JavaScript buttons don't work in Lightning. So anything else there? Because we are kind of getting up onto time here, and we want to be able to wrap up and go through. But I mean, hopefully this gives you some ideas of some of the things you can do with flows and actions. And I really can't stress enough how useful this can be for this particular site here. It's usually got ways to install. So for example, this one's been updated and I don't have the quick choice. So I had a card style that I was looking for, which wasn't actually installed in this org. But you'll find these are really easy to install. There's usually kind of key instructions for how to do them and how to get in here and what you need to install or update. So it installs just like any other AppExchange package. I pick my org and tell it where to install. It asks me This is an existing package in this org, so it's probably going to ask me if I want to upgrade it. Yep, and I acknowledge that it's come from a partner and it is not Salesforce created and blah, 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 blah. And so now this would actually probably allow me to do what I was trying to do without having to get into parsing strings. But this unofficial SF, super cool, super huge. The content is curated by Alex Edelstein, who is one of the product managers for Salesforce for the Flow. So this is maybe unofficial stuff in that it's not their kind of content, but there's some beginner tutorials, how-to guides, but there's also these screen components and actions that are available. So let's take a look at here our screen components. You know, what are some screen components we can have? Well, we can actually change the navigation. Another component I use, confetti. So remember when I created my break activities and it popped confetti across the screen? Well, that was just a component that I put here that I dragged down and told it how to use confetti. You can, you know, change your display text around a little bit to have it use certain types. You can have a copy to clipboard button. So flow screens, and say you're feeding some information back and you want to be able to give someone a way to copy something back. Say it's a software developer and you give a code back to them for activation. They would be able to then have a copy button there. Super simple, basic, extremely powerful. Creating custom metadata. So one of the great things with Salesforce now is we have this custom metadata types, and we can create configuration stuff that we can deploy. But sometimes we need to give users the ability to do that, and only admins can do it. Well, not anymore. This custom metadata component will actually let you upload a CSV and create the appropriate records. Custom headers, banners, formatting, and mode for your flows. So this lets you style it and make it prettier and show other stuff. This data table component was the one that I showed you is fantastic. You know, these work just like anything else. Icon picker, so that was one, again, part of the base pack. The flow button bar, again, part of the base pack now. So if you get a lot of these base packs, like the one that I had installing here as an upgrade, and the other one, you get a lot of these components out of the box that you can use and work with and have a lot of other things. Again, these are open source and they are free. So let's do this. I need to get back to this page. All right. I need flow screen components. So there's others. Let's talk about actions here that we have here. So there's a lot of components here that can be useful, a lot of other things. Recaptcha if you want to verify that it's a person, you know, other stuff like that's possible. But let's look at the actions here. So our actions that we have are things like
Mark, there's a time check. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, trying to wrap up. So calling a subflow, the nice thing is this actually works as an Apex action. So it has some advantages over the basic call subflow, namely that you can use it in before insert. There are things you can do to convert CSV to string. You can compare multi-select pick lists, convert date to date time and back and forth, convert files to attachments and back and forth, data mapper, data matching, executing a SQL query, because you can do more advanced stuff with a SQL query than you can with a get records. All sorts of things that you have here for actions that you can work with that do certain things. There's a better email action that lets you do more advanced stuff with your email. Navigate everywhere lets you control your navigation more. So what happens after your flow ends? You can make it navigate to a record. You can make it navigate back to a home page. You can make it go to a list view, etc. So there's lots of things that you can do with flows and these actions here. These are super cool. And the last thing that I want to show you is, you know, one of the links that Shiva had on the Flow Orchestrator. So this is a paid product, but they have a way to play around with this. And they have a tutorial in Flow Orchestrator. So if you want to see more about this, there is actually the Flow Orchestrator here. And the tutorial actually has a package that you can install that enables it in that developer org. And so you can actually play around with Flow Orchestrator to see how you can combine flows and put them together and stuff like that. So this is something that's very cool to check out. I highly recommend checking this out. And with that, that covers what we've got for today. Feel free to connect with me, ask questions and other stuff like that. But I think now we want to get to the drawing.
Great,
Last time
thanks
we
so
sort
much.
of ran out of time for it.
Yeah, that was a lot of magic. It was amazing. So, just to let everyone know, we also have another presenter coming next month, Andrew Fergus, and he approached me to say that he would be presenting. He would want to present for next week. So next month. So yeah, you can look forward to that one. And Mark, anytime if you can spare time, you are welcome anytime. So to present, this audience is really grateful for the information that you're giving. So let me share the screen for our final wheel, Ohana Wheel of Fortune. Let's see what happens. Can everyone see the screen? This is based on all the names that were entered in the Excel sheet I shared. I hope everybody has put their names. I'm going to run the Wheel of Fortune now. Rishabh V.
Hi, I'm here only. Thank you so much.
Oh, there you are. Okay, Rishabh, so please contact me on LinkedIn. You have my LinkedIn, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the LinkedIn or email, you can contact me, send me your email, and send me your web assessor email too, right? For me to.
Okay, sure.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
great. Congratulations, and for being the winner of today's Wheel of Fortune
Thank
contest.
you so much.
Okay, enjoy. And yeah, and I think everybody enjoyed the session today. So we look forward to meeting you again next month with another awesome presentation. Thank you, everyone. It's about time to wrap up. So goodbye and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Shiba.
And just an encouragement, if you're not connected to me, LinkedIn, Twitter, Trailblazer community, absolutely, please feel free to connect with me. And, you know, I answer questions where I can and other stuff like that. The other resource that I want to share that can be super helpful when you're trying to figure out is there is an Ohana Slack workspace, and it is available for free. You do not need to have a paid Slack account or through your work. You can just sign up with anything regularly. And this Ohana Slack workspace is there's a couple channels that relate to stuff, including that relates to
yeah, I've seen that. It actually
and it relates
many
to
channels, including job
processes, workflow rules, and the right. I think I've got a link here that I can use for you.
Yeah, Mark is sharing the link. So I've joined that channel and I find it extremely useful. They share everything, including celebrations to jobs to different aspects of Salesforce. So I encourage it. Thank you, Mark, for sharing that.
But yeah, there's a channel that has a lot of people who work heavily with Flow in it, in the workspace, and just kind of constantly involved. There's a lot of people who are there, a lot of experts. You'll still find like Jennifer Lee is in there, and several of the other admin evangelists are in there on a regular basis, and a lot of people who are on Automation Hour with flows and stuff like that. So it can be a really useful place, and you can often post a screenshot of what you've got, an error of what's going on, something you're stuck on. Some of the component developers are in there, so it's a really good space to get help when you're trying to work with. And the other thing is, you know, we all have different kinds of things that we have more experience with or less experience with, and you probably find people that you can help with stuff that you know that they may not be as familiar with. So it's a really great community to kind of get connected with other people and join up. So I really recommend kind of signing up and getting in there, because it's a fantastic little space to connect with people and get help and give help. And that's it.
Right. So I guess let's wrap it up. So see you all next month, and have a great and awesome weekend and month ahead. Bye-bye. Till next time.